Lorraine Bennett always saw the elderly woman at 7:42 a.m. when she arrived at the same stop. Every time the same blue jacket, same fabric bag, same lost expression. The woman would board the bus, sit in the front seat, and ask Lorraine, "Will you take me home?" Lorraine would kindly reply every time, "Yes, ma'am, I'll take you home." But the woman didn't know where she was going. For 3 weeks, the same routine repeated. The elderly woman would board, ask her question, Lorraine would answer, and the woman would sit quietly. Until that Thursday morning when the woman leaned toward Lorraine and said, "Miss Bennett, did you do your homework today?" Lorraine's heart stopped. That voice, that tone. It took her back 30 years, to high school hallways, to English class. The elderly woman was Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the teacher who had changed Lorraine's life. But Mrs. Whitmore didn't recognize her anymore. There was no familiarity in her eyes, only lostness. Lorraine Bennett had been driving the Route 47 bus in Richmond, Virginia, for 11 years. It wasn't glamorous work, early mornings, difficult passengers, traffic, weather. But Lorraine liked the routine, the predictability. She knew every stop, every street, every traffic light pattern on her route. At 46 years old, Lorraine's life was simple and structured. She lived alone in a small house in Church Hill, had never married, had no children. Her younger brother lived in Atlanta with his family. Her parents had passed away years ago. The bus route was her constant companion, the passengers her temporary family. Most drivers barely noticed their regular riders. But Lorraine paid attention. She knew Mr. Hendricks, who got on at Monument Avenue, always carried coffee and a newspaper. She knew the young mother at Broad Street had twins who loved when Lorraine made funny faces. She knew the college student at VCU always thanked her in 3 languages. And for the past 3 weeks, she'd known the elderly woman who appeared at the Belvedere Street stop every morning at 7:42. The woman looked to be in her 70s, always wearing the same faded blue jacket regardless of weather. Her silver hair was neatly combed, but her eyes held a distant, confused quality. She carried a worn fabric bag and moved slowly, carefully, as if the world around her was unfamiliar. The first time the woman boarded, she'd climbed the steps with difficulty, paid her fare with trembling hands, and asked Lorraine directly, "Will you take me home?" Lorraine had smiled gently. "Yes, ma'am. Have a seat." The woman had sat in the front row, the seat reserved for elderly and disabled passengers, and stared out the window with that lost expression. At each stop, the woman would look around hopefully, as if expecting to recognize something. But she never got off. She rode the entire route, from Belvedere Street through downtown, past the Capitol building, through Shockoe Bottom, all the way to the East End terminus. When they reached the end of the line, Lorraine had approached her gently. "Ma'am, this is the last stop. Do you know where you're going?" The woman had looked at her with those confused, watery eyes. "Home. I need to go home. Do you know your address?" The woman's face crumpled with frustration. I should know, but I can't. It's not there anymore." Lorraine had called her supervisor, who'd contacted social services. Eventually, a caseworker arrived and helped the woman, though she'd resisted, insisting she just needed to get home. Lorraine had thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, there she was again. Same stop, same time, same blue jacket. "Will you take me home?" "Yes, ma'am." The pattern continued for 3 weeks. Every morning, the woman appeared. Every morning, she asked the same question. Every morning, Lorraine gave the same answer, and the woman rode the full route without getting off. Lorraine started bringing extra coffee and a muffin, offering it to the woman who always accepted with a polite, "Thank you, dear." They developed a quiet ritual. The woman would sit, Lorraine would drive. Occasionally, they'd exchange small pleasantries about the weather or the morning traffic. Lorraine had tried to learn more. "What's your name, ma'am?" The woman would pause, searching her memory. Sometimes she'd offer a name, Eleanor or Ellie, but she was never certain. She couldn't remember her address, her phone number, or where she was supposed to be. Lorraine had reported it to her supervisor multiple times. Social services had been contacted, but the woman wasn't breaking any laws by riding the bus, and without identification or willingness to accept help, there was little anyone could do. Then came that Thursday morning in late October. The weather was crisp, leaves changing color, morning fog rolling off the James River. Lorraine pulled up to the Belvedere Street stop at exactly 7:42 a.m., and there she was, the elderly woman in her blue jacket. She boarded as always, paid her fare, and sat in the front seat. But today, something was different. The woman kept glancing at Lorraine, studying her face with an intensity that hadn't been there before. At a red light on Broad Street, the woman suddenly leaned forward. "Miss Bennett," she said clearly, "did you do your homework today?" Lorraine's hands froze on the steering wheel. Miss Bennett. Nobody had called her that in 30 years. She turned to look at the woman properly for the first time. Really look. Past the aged skin, the confused eyes, the weathered appearance. She looked at the shape of the face, the way the woman held herself, the distinctive way she pronounced certain words. Lorraine's heart was pounding. Eleanor Whitmore, her English teacher from junior and senior year. The woman who had changed Lorraine's life. Lorraine had been a struggling student in high school, not because she lacked intelligence, but because home life was chaotic. Her father had been an alcoholic, her mother worked 3 jobs, and Lorraine had been responsible for taking care of her younger brother. School had been an afterthought, somewhere between survival and exhaustion. She'd been failing most of her classes junior year, on track to drop out. Then Mrs. Whitmore had pulled her aside after English class one day. "Miss Bennett, you wrote an essay last week about your neighborhood. It was remarkable, raw and honest and beautifully observed. You have talent." Lorraine had been stunned. Nobody had ever told her she was good at anything. Mrs. Whitmore had spent the next 2 years mentoring Lorraine, staying after school to help with homework, encouraging her to join the school newspaper, writing recommendation letters for college applications. When Lorraine's father had kicked her out the summer before senior year, Mrs. Whitmore had helped her find emergency housing through a school program. Without Mrs. Whitmore, Lorraine wouldn't have graduated. She certainly wouldn't have gone to community college, wouldn't have built the stable life she had now. And now here was Mrs. Whitmore, riding Lorraine's bus every morning, lost and confused, unable to find her way home. The light turned green. Lorraine drove on autopilot, her mind racing. Mrs. Whitmore had to be in her mid-70s now. The confusion, the memory loss, the inability to find home. This was clearly Alzheimer's or dementia. At the next stop, Lorraine pulled over and activated her hazard lights. She turned to Mrs. Whitmore. "Mrs. Whitmore, it's me, Lorraine Bennett. I was your student at Lincoln High." The woman looked at her blankly. "I'm sorry, dear. Were you in my morning class or afternoon?" "Morning. 1994 and 1995. You helped me graduate. You helped me get into college." Mrs. Whitmore's expression flickered with something. Maybe recognition, maybe just confusion. "That's nice. But I really need to get home now. I have papers to grade." Lorraine took a deep breath. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you know your address?" "Of course I do. It's—" She trailed off, frustration crossing her face. I know it. It's just not there right now." "Do you live alone?" "My husband. No, he passed. Years ago. I live somewhere with trees. A blue door. Or was it green?" Lorraine pulled back into traffic. She had to figure this out. Mrs. Whitmore was clearly living somewhere, leaving every morning, boarding this bus, and riding aimlessly because she couldn't remember where home was. At the end of the route, instead of calling social services like usual, Lorraine tried something different. "Mrs. Whitmore, will you show me what's in your bag?" The elderly woman clutched it protectively. "My papers. My grade book. May I see?" Hesitantly, Mrs. Whitmore opened the bag. Inside was no grade book. Instead, there were random items. A library card. Several envelopes addressed to Eleanor Whitmore, at an address Lorraine couldn't quite read. A photograph of a younger woman with a class full of students. And a small notebook filled with names and addresses in shaky handwriting. Lorraine's hands trembled as she looked at the envelopes. The address was partially visible. Hanover Avenue. "Mrs. Whitmore, is Hanover Avenue where you live?" "Hanover? Yes, I think maybe. I'm not sure." Lorraine's route didn't go anywhere near Hanover Avenue, which was in the Museum District, a neighborhood full of older homes near Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. That explained why Mrs. Whitmore never recognized any stops on Route 47. She was on the completely wrong bus. But how was she getting to the Belvedere Street stop every morning? And more importantly, how was Lorraine going to help her get home? Lorraine made a decision. She called her supervisor. Tony, I need to take a personal situation at end of route. Can you have someone cover my return trip? Tony sounded annoyed but agreed. Lorraine's shift technically ended at the terminus anyway. Another driver usually took the bus back. When the replacement driver arrived, Lorraine approached Mrs. Whitmore. Come with me. I'm going to help you get home. Oh, would you? That's so kind. I have papers to grade. Lorraine led Mrs. Whitmore to her personal car in the employee lot. She helped her into the passenger seat and buckled her seatbelt. Then she drove toward the museum district, watching for Hanover Avenue. The street was lined with beautiful early 20th century homes, colonial revivals, Tudor revivals, and craftsman bungalows, most well-maintained with mature trees and tidy yards. Do any of these look familiar? Lorraine asked. Mrs. Whitmore peered out the window. I don't know. Maybe. They all look the same. Lorraine drove slowly, looking for something, anything that might trigger recognition. She checked the envelopes again, trying to read the full address in the morning light. Finally, she could make it out, 2847 Hanover Avenue. She found the house, a charming craftsman-style bungalow with a deep front porch, painted gray with white trim. The yard was slightly overgrown, newspapers piled on the porch steps. No car in the driveway. Is this it? Lorraine asked. Mrs. Whitmore stared at the house. I think so. Yes. The porch. I know that porch. Lorraine helped her out of the car and up the walkway. She knocked on the door. No answer. She tried the doorbell. Silence inside. Do you have a key? Mrs. Whitmore dug through her bag and produced a key ring with 3 keys. The second one worked. The door swung open into a dim hallway. Hello. Lorraine called out. Is anyone home? No response. Lorraine helped Mrs. Whitmore inside. The house was clean but had an unused feeling. Mail stacked on a side table, dust on surfaces, curtains drawn. In the living room, Lorraine saw photographs. Mrs. Whitmore as a younger woman, a man who was probably her late husband, and a young woman who might be a daughter. Mrs. Whitmore, do you have children? Someone who checks on you. My daughter, Caroline. She lives somewhere. I don't remember where. Lorraine found a phone in the kitchen and checked the recent calls. Several were from a number labeled Caroline's cell. Lorraine pressed redial. After 3 rings, a woman answered. Mom? Mom, where are you? I've been calling all morning. This isn't your mother, Lorraine said. My name is Lorraine Bennett. I'm a bus driver. I found your mother on my route, and I've brought her home to Hanover Avenue. Oh, thank God. The woman's voice broke with relief. I've been so worried. She keeps wandering off. I live in D.C. I try to check on her several times a week, but I can't be there every day. She refuses to move to assisted living. She insists she's fine on her own. She's not fine, Lorraine said gently. She's been riding my bus for 3 weeks, unable to remember where she lives. Caroline was quiet for a moment. I know she's not fine. I've been trying to figure out what to do. Her doctor says it's advancing quickly, the Alzheimer's. But she won't accept help. She gets angry when I suggest a care facility. What if there was another option? Lorraine found herself saying. Over the next hour, Lorraine and Caroline talked. Caroline was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., working long hours, unable to move to Richmond to care for her mother full-time. She'd hired a part-time caregiver who came 3 times a week, but Mrs. Whitmore kept dismissing her, insisting she didn't need help. Lorraine made a proposal. She would check on Mrs. Whitmore every morning after her bus shift ended. She'd make sure she took her medication, had breakfast, and didn't wander off. It wasn't professional care, but it was something. Why would you do this? Caroline asked. You don't even know us. Your mother saved my life when I was 16, Lorraine said simply. She believed in me when nobody else did. This is the least I can do. And so began Lorraine's secret mission. Every morning after finishing her Route 47 shift at 9:30 a.m., Lorraine drove to Hanover Avenue. She'd let herself in with the key Caroline had given her, check on Mrs. Whitmore, help her with breakfast, make sure she took her pills. Most days, Mrs. Whitmore didn't remember Lorraine was coming. Sometimes she thought Lorraine was the cleaning lady, or a neighbor, or occasionally, a former student, though never the right one. But Lorraine didn't mind. She just showed up, day after day. She learned Mrs. Whitmore's routines. She liked oatmeal with brown sugar. She watched game shows in the afternoon. She kept trying to prepare lessons, using old magazines and newspapers. Sometimes she was lucid for moments, talking about her teaching career with clarity. Other times, she thought it was 1985 and asked why Lorraine was wearing such strange clothes. Lorraine started doing small things to help. She organized the medication into daily containers. She put labels on cabinet doors. She created a photo board with important information: Caroline's number, the address, a note saying, "You live here. You are safe." The professional caregiver, a kind woman named Shanice, started coordinating with Lorraine. Between them, Mrs. Whitmore had daily care and company. But some days were harder than others. One morning in December, Lorraine arrived to find Mrs. Whitmore sitting on the porch in her nightgown, crying. It was 38 degrees outside. "I can't find my classroom," Mrs. Whitmore sobbed. "The children are waiting. I'm late. I'm never late." Lorraine wrapped a blanket around her and helped her inside. "You're retired now, Mrs. Whitmore. You taught for 40 years. Your students all grew up. You did an amazing job." "Did I? I don't remember. I can't remember anything anymore." That was the worst part. The moments when Mrs. Whitmore was aware enough to realize she was losing herself. The fear and frustration in those moments was heartbreaking. Lorraine held her hand. "You were the best teacher I ever had. You changed my life." Mrs. Whitmore looked at her with sudden focus. "Did I teach you?" "Yes. My name is Lorraine Bennett. You taught me English at Lincoln High in the 1990s. For just a moment, something flickered in Mrs. Whitmore's eyes. "Lorraine, you wrote an essay about your neighborhood. It was beautiful." Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "You remember. I remember you were special. I remember you needed help. Did I help you?" "Yes. You saved me." Mrs. Whitmore smiled softly. "Then I did something right." The moment of clarity passed quickly, and Mrs. Whitmore was back to confusion. But Lorraine held on to that moment like a treasure. Months passed. Winter turned to spring. Mrs. Whitmore's condition deteriorated slowly but steadily. Some days she thought Lorraine was her daughter. Some days she didn't recognize Lorraine at all. But Lorraine kept showing up. Caroline visited every weekend now, working remotely on Fridays so she could spend more time with her mother. She and Lorraine had become friends, bonded by their mutual care for Eleanor. "I don't know how to thank you," Caroline said one Saturday afternoon while they sat on the porch, watching Mrs. Whitmore doze in a chair. "What you've done for her, for us. She did it for me first," Lorraine said. "I'm just returning the favor." By summer, it was clear Mrs. Whitmore needed more care than morning visits could provide. She'd started having falls. She'd left the stove on twice. The wandering was getting worse despite locked doors. Caroline made the difficult decision to move her mother to a memory care facility, a nice one, with gardens and activities specifically designed for Alzheimer's patients. The day they moved her, Mrs. Whitmore was confused and upset, not understanding why she was leaving her home. Lorraine came to help with the transition. In the new room at Brookdale Memory Care, Caroline hung photos and arranged familiar items to make it feel homier. Mrs. Whitmore sat on the bed, looking small and lost. Lorraine sat beside her. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're going to be safe here. People will take care of you. But I don't know this place." "That's okay. You don't have to know it. You just have to let people help you." Mrs. Whitmore looked at Lorraine, really looked at her. "You're kind. Are you a teacher?" "No. But I learned from the best teacher there was." Lorraine continued visiting, though less frequently now that Mrs. Whitmore had round-the-clock care. She'd come on Saturday mornings, sit with her, read to her sometimes. Mrs. Whitmore rarely recognized her anymore, but Lorraine didn't mind. One Saturday in early fall, a year after Lorraine had first recognized her on the bus, she arrived to find Caroline in the hallway, crying. "She's gone," Caroline said, peacefully, in her sleep, last night. Lorraine felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She'd known this day would come, but somehow it still felt impossible. At the funeral, Caroline asked Lorraine to speak. Standing at the podium, looking at photos of Mrs. Whitmore through the decades, Lorraine found her voice. "I met Eleanor Whitmore when I was 16 years old and failing at life. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself. She believed I had value and potential when I was certain I had neither. She didn't just teach me English. She taught me that one person's faith in you can change your entire trajectory." Lorraine paused, looking at the assembled people, former students, teaching colleagues, family members. "Years later, I found Mrs. Whitmore lost and confused on my bus route. She didn't remember me, didn't remember much of anything. But I remembered her, and I got to return the favor, helping her find her way home, just like she helped me find my way when I was lost. She taught me that kindness isn't about recognition or reward. It's about showing up, day after day, for people who need you. And that's what she did for me, and what I tried to do for her. After the funeral, several former students approached Lorraine, sharing their own stories of how Mrs. Whitmore had changed their lives. She'd helped dozens, maybe hundreds, of students over 4 decades. Driving home that evening, Lorraine thought about the circle of care, how Mrs. Whitmore had cared for her, and how she'd been able to care for Mrs. Whitmore in return. How that small act of showing up every day after her bus shift had felt like the most important thing she'd ever done. 6 months later, Lorraine was driving Route 47 when she noticed a new elderly man at one of the stops, looking confused and disoriented. He boarded slowly, couldn't figure out how to pay the fare, sat down heavily looking lost. The old Lorraine might have just driven past, might have called it in and moved on. But now she pulled over at the next safe spot, walked back to where the man sat, and asked gently, "Sir, are you okay? Do you know where you're trying to go?" Because Mrs. Whitmore had taught her something important, that showing up for people who can't find their way home isn't a burden. It's a privilege. It's how we honor the people who showed up for us when we were lost. And Lorraine Bennett, bus driver on Route 47, would keep showing up.